share the whiteboard with you. Let's think of this scenario, guys. I will create here. This is an entity set. Suppose it's employee. The name is employee. We will think of different types of attributes. You know, when we talk about employee, attributes are ID, name, address, contact, and other things. So I will write different attributes. Emp ID, emp name, emp address, emp contact, now let me draw the circles. This is of course the primary key. Now, for the contacts, some people have more than one value for the contact. Like the contact may be phone number, like home phone, cell phone, another cell phone. So we will use multi-valued attribute. The multi-valued attribute, we will represent that by double line for the attribute. So the attribute with a double circle is multi-valued. Multi-valued means it could have more than one value for the same entity. Like here we are talking about employee. You can think of one employee who has multiple contacts. It doesn't mean every single employee must have multiple. No, even if one employee has multiple, it has to be multiple. Yeah, I will share everything, don't worry. Do you understand what is the multiple valued attribute? Okay. Now for the employee address, it should be double D. For the employee address, maybe we need details of the address. No, the address is not multi-valued because the person will have one address. But we need, okay, explain again. You mean the multi-valued attribute? Anytime if one of entities in the entity set may have more than one value for any of attributes, it has to be multi-valued attributes. Like now here, employee. How many employees we will have many employees, regardless about how many. 100,000, whatever. Now, the employee contact, like the phone number. How many phone numbers the person may have? Maybe one, maybe two, maybe three. Cell phone, home phone, 2 cell phone numbers, it depends. So this is multi-valued. Multi-valued, we have to represent it as a double line circle, not one line. Multi-valued attribute represented by double-lined circle. It means maybe the entity has more than one value for this attribute. Like the contact, maybe the employee has 2 or more numbers or values. Like home phone, cell phone, بليز لا تعملوا إزعاج.
وين إزعاج؟
زي كل مرة. Okay guys, you understand the idea of multi-valued? Now let's go to the address. Suppose we need more details about the address, like the street number, the house number or the building number, the street name, the city, the postal code. We need details. In this case, of course, I will I will draw the circle around. Here we will use composite attribute. The composite attribute is like one name, but it branches into different, like here, street, city, postal code, building number. Every one of them is like the attribute. We will put it in a circle and okay guys, if the person has more than one address, then the address must be double lined. Okay, so it could be multi-valued and composite at the same time, no problem. Now I will put another DOB, which means what? Date of birth. And age. When we have date of birth and age, they must be related. So we should not enter the age. Like if you are entering values of the employees, when you enter the employee data, employee ID, name, everything, now the date of birth. When you enter the date of birth and press enter, yes, the name could be composite. That's true. We can make it composite, like first name, last name. That's true. Now the age must not be entered, must be calculated. The system, through the date of birth and the current date, must calculate the age. Because if we enter the age, now we are entering data of employees. The employee age is 22. After 5 years, what's the age? It's nonsense that we have to get back every year to change the age. Maybe we have thousands of employees. Even if we have 10 employees, it's nonsense. We have to come back to the system and change the age. We should let the system calculate the age and keep changing it. This kind of attribute, which its value calculated by the system, we call it derived attribute. Derived attribute. Its value calculated by the system, not entered directly. How to represent it? Dashed line circle. I don't think we have a style of the line, so I have to draw it by myself as a dashed. Okay. Yes. If you want to make the full the name like first and last, yeah, you can make it composite. These are types of different kind of attributes. Any questions about different types of attributes? Okay. Now, suppose the company needs to know about the employee's family. Composite attribute can be represented as same attributes. I don't understand your question. Admission number or any ID can be derived attribute, yes. Sometimes, like for example, the student ID. When you are a student, the system is generating your ID number or your student number, so it could be derived. Yes, composite key representation is simple as other. Yes, it is. Any more questions? Okay. Again, if the company needs to keep tracking of the employee's family, why? Regardless about why. Because the company should care of the employee. Why they want to know about the employee's family? It's their business. They want to know, like the employee has dependent like wife, kids, maybe parents, any dependent. So I'm not gonna say family, I'll call it dependent. Maybe they want to know about the dependent because the company is offering health insurance for the employee and every single individual of his or her dependents. So they need their details. I will draw here another entity set and I'll call it dependent. The dependent means people who related to the employee. So here we will have okay, let me write it first. No, I will complete drawing. Let's say the employee has dependents. Only age. Why only age? Who can tell? Why only age, not both? Yes, the date of birth will never never be changed. The date of birth is a fixed value. The derived value is a value which could be changed. That's why we make it derived. Calculated by the system, because it could be any time it could be changed. If we make it fixed value, that will be correct at the time of entering, but after a while it will be wrong. Exactly like the age. The age now is correct, after a year it's wrong, and so on. So we should keep it changed depending on the date of birth and the current date. Like the system calculating the age upon the current date and the DOB. So the age is derived. The DOB, of course not. It's fixed. Okay, let's get back to the dependent. The dependent is a person who is not an employee in the company. And that's a good question. That is a good question. Why admission number will come under derived attribute? It's not a must. It's not a must, but if we think about the moment when the data entry person is entering data of the person, of the employee, or of the student, whatever. Any value the data entry can enter is not derived. Any value the system will generate could be derived, even if it's not changing. It's still derived. But if we assume it's not derived, that's okay. The DOB is how the system will enter the DOP. Anything the system can generate. The system can never generate the DOB. It can generate the age. It can generate the salary upon qualifications. It can generate the number, because we don't want the data entry person to enter the number. We want the number to be generated. Any questions? Yes? Let me read this. It will be easy for data entry person because you don't have to remember value of what? It's not about if the data entry will remember or not. It's about if the data is a fixed value given to the data entry or not. Like, suppose I'm the data entry and I'm entering data of student. I will get the data of student from the student, right? Your name, your ID number, your address, you are giving me this, but you will not give me your admission number. I will provide you with the admission number. The admission number must never be duplicated. So if we leave it to the data entry to choose, that will be a very big mistake because, of course, the data entry will duplicate. So we let the system generate it. When you are creating the ER, why? Let's go a step back. Why you are drawing the ER? What for? What's the purpose of creating the ER? Why? And after creating the ER, who will read it? Who will get benefit of the ER? We have a team for building the system or developing the system. We have a team. One of the team members will meet the client. Not all the team members are going to meet the client. So the person who meets the client and collects the information about the system will draw the ER upon that. Other team members will not go and meet the client and try to ask the client about the system and understand everything from the client about the system. No. They don't need. They just need to look at the ER. When they look at the ER must provide them with correct information. So when they see dashed, when they see dashed attribute, they know they must let the system generate or calculate the value. And when they see double lines, they know this entity may have multi-valued, so they make the system up on that. Okay? Is it clear? You are not alone. You are working within a team. And what you're doing, somebody else will continue. You have to give precise information. The other person will take precise information from your output as an input and continue. It's like a chain of processes. Yes. The employee ID? No, the employee ID means the ID, the identification number, like the national or the SIN or the national number, so social security number, social insurance number, something from the government. That is the ID. But if we are talking about employment number, yeah, then it could be derived. Yes, 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 questions? Let's get back. Salary will come under derived attribute. It depends. It depends. Maybe the salary is not calculated by the system. Yes, the employee will not give us his salary, but there is another people who will give the data entry, the salary of the person. If the system in that company is calculating the salary, then it's derived. So we should return to the client to know about that. Yes, of course, but maybe the origin, as you called it, is not in the same entity set, in another entity set, and there's a relation. Yes. Because the system will calculate the value depends on what? In the date of birth case, the age depends on the date of birth. But in the admission number, we don't have something to depend on. There is a formula in the system. It will generate the number upon that formula. So it depends if there is a value we use to derive or to calculate or not. Yes, in the case of the admission number, we don't depend on a previous or another value. We depend on a formula. Yeah, the salary could be depends on the rank, for example. In the case of big companies or governmental organizations, they have rank. For each employee, they give a rank. Upon the rank, the salary is specified. So it will be something like this. But if we are talking about a small company, I'm sure it's not upon the system, because the owner or the manager will specify the salary, not by the system. It's not systematic. Any more questions? Let's go to the dependent. Okay, now we have a dependent. Dependent entity set has dependents of the employee, like wife, kids, maybe parents, maybe younger brothers, whatever. All family members the employee has as dependent, so they depend on the employee. The company needs to know about these people because the company is issuing insurance for the employee and his dependent. So they need their data. But if the employee leaves the company, they will not keep any information about his dependents. When we have such entity set, entities depend on another entity set. If the entity here removed, all of here are removed. So they are related. In this case, we call this weak entity set. Weak entity or weak entity set. And we represent it as a double-lined rectangle or box. This is a weak entity. Any one of dependent is a weak entity. The weak entity is an entity which related to another entity in the system. Not just related, depend on. If the employee leaves the company, all dependents will be removed. The relation, of course, when every time we have weak entities, we must have relation between the weak entity and we call it the owner entity. Every weak entity has owner entity. There is a relation between the weak entity and the owner entity. Every weak entity has owner entity, and there must be a relation between the weak entity and the owner entity. The relation between the weak entity and owner entity must be one to many, always one to many, and always, yes, owner, yes, and always it's total participation from the weak entity. And the relation must be double-lined. Okay? Weak entity is an entity that depends on another entity, even even the primary key of the weak entity is not enough to represent the weak entity. Must have part of the primary key from the owner and part from the weak entity. So here, what do we have? We have like ID, let's say tip ID, tip name, maybe tip BOB, yes, relation, relation, I mean relation to employee. Now, the primary key which is the tip ID must be dashed. The primary key of the weak entity has to be dashed. Okay, let me look at questions. Relation should also be double-lined. This relation. You know what I mean by relation? It's relation to the employee. Like when we put the dependent here, we have to put the relation like wife, son, daughter, father. This is the meaning of relation. Amarir, related to your question. The relation here is how the dependent related. So of course it's not double-lined. It has single value, not multi-valued. Weak entity always have weak relationship. This is a weak relationship. The weak relationship must be double-lined. The weak entity must have a weak relationship with the owner. This is a must. Every weak entity must have a weak relationship with the owner entity. Every weak entity must have owner entity. But maybe the weak entity has other relationships with other entities. That's not weak. Okay? Here in this example, maybe we don't have, but we can have another example. Yes, I'll give you example. No. For both sides, just the weak entity has to be double-lined. The owner entity is not double-lined. If we make it double-lined, it will be weak. And if it's weak, it needs owner, and so on. Now, whenever we go to the system, if I want any dependent from here, how can I search for the dependent? By the employee ID with the dependent ID. Not the dependent ID alone. No, both. Employee ID with the dependent ID. Together, yes. Let me read this question. Will weak entity relation with any other entity except owner will represent a no? No. Not double. Only one double lined relationship with the owner. Any other relationship, whatever the weak entity has, will not be double lined. And if you make it double lined, it's wrong. Every weak entity has one weak relationship, which is double lined relationship, which is with the owner entity. If the weak entity has other relationships, will not be double lined. Imp ID required, yes. Whenever we are dealing with the dependent, we have to let the employee involved. Like, we want to issue card, insurance card for the dependent. We have to know this dependent related to which employee. So the dependent ID with the employee ID together. For any reason, if the employee leaves the company, we know which dependent related because the dep ID with the imp ID together. So every one related to this imp ID will be removed. Yes. Only the primary key is underlined with a dashed line for the weak entity. No, we should not, because the relation represented that. Some people, let me tell you, I told you yesterday, you cannot always trust the internet, especially when we see ERs, because not all ERs in the internet created by experienced people. Some people make a mistake, which is adding foreign keys on the ER, which is wrong. You know what is the foreign key, aren't you? The employee ID, if I add it here, will be a foreign key. Foreign keys must not be added in the ER. Yes, so you know what is the foreign key, but you must know we should not add any foreign key in the ER. We will add the foreign key later, not in the ER. Maybe. If somebody is the person who is sponsoring or the financially supporter for the parents, then yeah, they are one of dependents. Dependent, why I didn't call it kids or family? Because maybe different dependents. That's why we have to explain the relation to the employee. So here relation means relation of the dependent to the employee. Any entity which is related to another entity, like the entity exists because of other entity, this is weak. How to know if it's weak or not? You must think this entity here because of other entity. That's weak entity. Composite attribute, yeah, it could have, yes. No problem about that. The weak entity may have composite, may have multi-valued attribute, may have derived attribute. It could have any of attributes. Let me take a screenshot of this before I delete it, because I'll send it to you. Okay, now I will go to another page. Let's look at this example. We have author. And author has books. Each book has many copies. And we have let's try to imagine a system of a library. In the library we have books. I will not call it box, let me call it book, because it has to be consistency. I don't say authors or copies, so let me say book, not books. Okay. We have book. The book has author, and the book has copy. And we have members. Members are borrowing copy. Okay, so we have member. Now the book. What does it have? ISBN, yes. Okay. ISBN. Every book has ISBN, and every book has a title. The ISBN will be the primary key, and it has a title. The author will have name, the author may have more, like name, ID, contact, phone, whatever. Now the member I mean the person who borrows books from the library. Of course, has membership number, name, address, and whatever. This is not our concern. ID and other information for the member. Now the copy of the book. Oh, sorry. The copy is an entity. This example to explain the weak entity. Which one of these four entity sets is a weak entity? Why? Why the weak entity is the copy, or why the copy is a weak entity? Yes, the copy cannot exist without the book. So every book has copies. The owner of the copy is the book. So the relation here must be double-lined. And it has to be total from the side of the copy, and it has to be one too many. Okay. Now, the person, the member, will borrow what? The author has a book, so we have a relation. Let's say right. Let's talk about this relation. Participation. Who can tell me the participation of author and book? What is the participation here and the participation here? Both are total. Exactly. We can never find a book without author, and all authors are here because they have books. How about cardinality? One too many, because each author can write many books. Yes. One book with one author? What do you mean one book with one author? Oh, yeah. Have you ever seen a book which was authored by two authors? So, is it one too many? Is it one too many? Many too many. Yes. Okay. Now, member borrows what? Of course, not the book. Not the book. The member borrows a copy. Because the copy actually is a book. But when we say member borrows a book, that's a mistake. because the book may have many copies. Does it mean the member will borrow all of the copies? No. Will borrow one copy. Participation. Total or partial, and which side you are talking about. Let's talk about the member. From the member side, all members here are borrowing book or borrowing copies of the book. It depends. It depends. Maybe the member of the library is not borrowing books, just coming to the library and read the book, then leave. Maybe coming to the library to use the PCs, maybe coming to the library for other activities. So it doesn't mean every member must. But on other case, maybe the client tells you the member is not a member if not borrowing a book. So it depends on the client, how their policy here. Let's suppose it's partial. Now for the copy. Before we talk about is it total or partial, what are the attributes of the copy? Yeah, it could be total. What are the attributes of the copy? We can have copy number. Okay. No, number of copies is not. Number of copies is for the book, not for the copy. If you want to add number of copies, it will be here. Number of copies. Because number of copies related to the book, not to the copy. Oops. Okay. The copy number will be dashed because it's a primary key of a weak entity. So we can have something called availability. What does it mean, availability? It means this copy is available right now or it's borrowed. Yeah, available in the library or not. If we want to add printing of book, that too will add in book. What do you mean by printing of a book? Vipola. Printing of a book. What does it mean? That will be for the copy. Because maybe we have copy in colored and copy in black and white. So it's not related to the book, it's related to the copy. So here, this example, I wanted to show you how the weak entity has one weak relationship with the owner, but it may have other relationships with other entities. Now, if we talk about the participation, we say that both of them partial. Now, the cardinality. The cardinality. What do you mean by copy type? The cardinality is many to many, of course. Okay, you understand now more about the weak entity. Okay, that's good. When the member borrowing the copy of the book, of course, we are not depend on the copy number. We depend on the ISBN with the copy number. It's obvious. Because every book has copy number. Like this book has copy number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That book has copy number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So when you say this member is borrowing copy number 5, copy number 5 of what? Copy number 5 of the book with ISBN blah blah blah. So it's obvious how the weak entity depends completely on the owner entity. Any questions? Cardinality from copy to member. Like the member can borrow multiple copies. The copy could be borrowed to many members. That's the meaning of the cardinality here. Many to many, yes. Weak entity, let me see the question. A weak entity is somewhat similar to composite attributes in the previous example. No. The composite attribute the composite attribute is different. The attribute can never have a relationship. If the copy here is a multi or is a composite, first of all, if it's a composite, then it has one value. Suppose it is multi-valued and composite. It could be, but how can we make a relationship with other entities? So no, it can't, no. Rahul, the weak entity can't be a composite attribute. Why partial from copy side? When you are not sure, make it partial. Because maybe there is a copy will never be borrowed. Can you sure 100% every single copy will be borrowed? That's it. So we are not sure 100%. We leave it partial. On the other hand, we are 100% sure the book was wrote by an author. Why it's okay? Now the member, how many times can borrow? And how many copies every time borrowing? Many. So one member can borrow many copies. Now the same copy of the book will be borrowed to one person only? It will be borrowed to many persons, so it's many to many. But the book has many copies. Can the copy belong to more than one book? It's impossible. So it's one to many. Any more questions? Okay, let me take a screenshot as well here to send it to you. Stop the